The loss of Charlie Watts left the Rolling Stones facing one of the most difficult moments in their history. For nearly 6 decades, he had been more than a drummer. He was the steady presence that kept everything together when tensions rose and personalities clashed. When news of his passing became public in August 2021, many fans were shocked to learn that none of the remaining members attended his funeral in England. To outsiders, the absence seemed impossible to understand. Questions quickly spread. Had there been a falling out? Was there some hidden disagreement no one knew about? The reality was very different. At the time of Charlie's death, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Ronnie Wood were in Boston preparing for the upcoming No Filter tour. International travel restrictions and strict pandemic regulations created enormous complications. Returning to England would have triggered quarantine requirements that threatened to derail the entire tour. The situation placed the band in an impossible position. On one side was the loss of a lifelong friend. On the other was a massive operation involving thousands of workers whose livelihoods depended on the tour moving forward. Every possible solution was examined, but regulations left little room for exceptions. What made the decision even harder was the fact that Charlie himself had already expressed what he wanted. Before undergoing a medical procedure weeks earlier, he had spoken openly about the future of the band. He understood his health was fragile and knew there was a possibility he would not be able to continue touring. According to those close to him, he made it clear that the Rolling Stones should not stop because of him. That message stayed with them after he was gone. Charlie had even helped select Steve Jordan as the drummer who would take his place if necessary. It was not a rushed choice made after tragedy struck. It was a decision Charlie personally supported because he believed Jordan understood the band's sound and spirit. When the tour finally began, every performance carried the weight of his absence. The group did not rely on lengthy speeches or dramatic displays. Instead, they honored him in quieter ways. His presence was felt throughout the shows, and his memory remained at the center of everything they did. For the surviving members, continuing to perform was not about business. It was about fulfilling the wishes of a friend who had always believed in showing up and doing the job no matter the circumstances. Those who knew Charlie understood that he valued commitment above almost everything else. He spent decades arriving on time, staying professional, and putting the band's success ahead of his own personal recognition. Walking away from the tour entirely would have gone against the principles he lived by throughout his life. Away from public attention, the band found their own ways to mourn. While the funeral remained a private family affair, close friends and longtime colleagues gathered separately to remember him. There were no cameras, no publicity, and no attempts to turn grief into a public event. It was exactly the kind of farewell Charlie would have preferred. His family protected that privacy carefully. Charlie had spent most of his life avoiding unnecessary attention. Even while belonging to one of the most famous bands in history, he remained remarkably reserved. Those closest to him felt that his final goodbye should reflect the same values. Instead of public displays, personal memories became the tribute. Stories were shared. Old photographs were revisited. Moments from 6 decades of friendship were remembered by the people who had lived them together. As the tour continued, reminders of Charlie remained everywhere. The empty space he once occupied could never truly be filled. Every song carried echoes of the drummer who had helped create the band's sound. Every performance served as another reminder of the role he had played in building one of the most successful groups in music history. For Keith Richards, Mick Jagger, and Ronnie Wood, the loss was deeply personal. They had spent more time with Charlie than with almost anyone else in their lives. They had traveled the world together, survived countless challenges, and experienced levels of fame few people could understand. That kind of bond does not disappear. The public may not have seen them standing beside his grave, but grief is not measured by appearances. Their farewell happened in a different way, shaped by circumstances, privacy, and respect for the man they had known for most of their lives. Charlie Watts left behind far more than a catalog of classic recordings. He left an example of professionalism, loyalty, humility, and quiet strength. In a world often driven by ego and attention, he remained grounded and consistent. That is why his influence continues long after his passing. His drumming helped define generations of music, but those who knew him best often spoke first about his character rather than his talent. They remembered a man who valued family, friendship, and integrity above celebrity. When the final notes of each concert fade away, that legacy remains. The Rolling Stones lost a drummer in 2021, but they also lost a brother, a friend, and one of the foundations upon which their entire story was built. Charlie Watts may no longer be physically present, but the rhythm he created continues to live on through every song, every performance, and every memory shared by those who were fortunate enough to know him. And that is a legacy that time cannot erase. Yet Charlie Watts' story was never only about his final years. Long before he became known as the heartbeat of the Rolling Stones, he was already different from almost everyone around him. While many young musicians dreamed of fame, fortune, and attention, Charlie cared about something far simpler. He loved music itself. Born in London in 1941, he grew up during a period when jazz records fascinated him more than celebrity culture ever could. The drummers he admired were not flashy performers chasing headlines. They were craftsmen whose skill could transform an entire performance without demanding attention for themselves. That mindset stayed with him for the rest of his life. When the Rolling Stones began rising to international fame during the 1960s, the contrast between Charlie and his bandmates became increasingly obvious. Mick Jagger embraced the spotlight. Keith Richards developed a reputation as a rebellious rock star. The group became associated with controversy, excess, and larger-than-life behavior. Charlie remained Charlie. He preferred quiet evenings over celebrity parties. He collected tailored suits instead of chasing trends. He often seemed more comfortable discussing jazz records than talking about fame. Many observers found this unusual. How could someone belong to one of the most famous bands on earth while appearing almost uninterested in the attention that came with it? The answer was simple. Charlie never viewed himself as a celebrity first. He viewed himself as a musician. That attitude earned enormous respect from those around him. Behind his calm appearance was a level of professionalism that few people could match. Night after night, year after year, he delivered the consistency that allowed the Rolling Stones to perform at the highest level. His playing was never about showing off. There were no unnecessary flourishes, no attempts to steal the spotlight. Instead, he focused on precision, timing, and creating the foundation that allowed everyone else to shine. Many musicians later described him as one of the most underrated drummers in rock history. His contribution was not measured by dramatic solos or attention-grabbing moments. It was measured by reliability. He gave every song exactly what it needed and nothing more. That discipline became one of the defining strengths of the Rolling Stones. Even during periods when internal conflicts threatened to divide the group, Charlie remained a stabilizing force. He rarely became involved in public disputes and almost never sought attention for himself. Yet his influence inside the band was far greater than many fans realized. The famous incident involving Mick Jagger revealed just how much respect Charlie commanded. One evening, after an inappropriate remark from Jagger, Charlie calmly prepared himself, dressed carefully, and confronted the singer face to face. What followed became one of the most famous stories in rock history. The moment was not about anger. It was about respect. Charlie wanted it understood that every member of the band mattered. No one was above the others simply because they stood at the front of the stage. That lesson was never forgotten. Over the decades, the Rolling Stones survived changing musical trends, personal struggles, legal battles, health scares, and countless predictions that their career was finished. Through all of it, Charlie remained one of the constants. Fans often focused on the personalities at the front of the stage, but musicians understood the truth. Behind every great Rolling Stones performance was the steady rhythm that held everything together. As the years passed, Charlie became an increasingly respected figure not only within rock music but across the wider musical world. Artists from different generations praised his restraint, taste, and dedication. Younger drummers studied his technique and admired the way he could make complicated performances appear effortless. Recognition continued to grow. Yet despite decades of success, he remained remarkably humble. Friends often described him as thoughtful, polite, and grounded. Fame never seemed to change him in the way it changed so many others. Perhaps that was because Charlie never allowed fame to become his identity. He knew exactly who he was before success arrived, and he never lost sight of that person afterward. That rare quality became one of the reasons people admired him so deeply. In an industry filled with constant noise, Charlie Watts represented calm. In a profession driven by attention, he represented humility. In a world obsessed with image, he represented authenticity. Those characteristics made him unique. They also ensured that his influence extended far beyond music itself. Today, millions of people continue listening to the recordings he helped create. New generations discover the Rolling Stones every year and experience the songs that defined entire eras. With every beat of the drums, Charlie's presence remains. Not because people refuse to let go of the past, but because truly great artists leave something behind that continues speaking long after they are gone. Charlie Watts was one of those artists. His life was proof that strength does not always need to be loud. Leadership does not always require attention. And greatness does not always stand at the front of the stage. Sometimes it sits quietly in the background, holding everything together while the world watches something else. That was Charlie Watts. And that is why his legacy continues to endure.